One of the best cabovers on our roads back in the day didn't get nearly the recognition it deserved. I'm talking about the Ford CL9000 Cabover. They were built between 1977 and 1990, and only at the one plant, Ford's truck plant in Kentucky. They were all aluminum cab construction, and you could get them with any Fuller transmission that you desired. The 7, the 9, the 10, or the 13 was available back then, and you could get them with any engine combination. They came stock with the 300 Cummins motor, but you could order a bigger Cummins like the 400 or the 444. You could order a 3406B Cat, or you could order the Silver 92 Detroit. The cab was mounted high on the frame, perhaps the highest cabover built back in the day. It stood at 9.5 feet tall, and in spite of the fact that it was so high, they still needed to have a doghouse in the cab to accommodate the engines, the bigger engines, and Ford liked to call it a low-profile doghouse, but it was still there. It was still in between the seats, and it interfered with getting to the passenger side or getting into the bunk. The cab came with both single and double bunk configurations. It had 3 separate heating and air conditioning units, so driver comfort was never an issue in those things. You were always warm and toasty or cool, whatever the weather required, and it had a huge windshield, about 18 square feet of glass out front. Just a ton of visibility in those things. The cab would tilt a full 80 degrees for great access into the engine compartment, and the front grille, the top half of that grille was hinged at the top, so you could flip that up for better access into the radiator. The trucks were only available through Ford, so you had to go to a Ford dealership to get one, but that also meant that Ford dealerships were tasked with all the maintenance and warranty duties involved with the CL9000. And again, this was a problem just like it was for GM, because not all the Ford dealerships had truck shops. And in fact, a lot of them had to work on those trucks outside. And the dealers didn't care much for that, but Ford had all the power over the dealerships back then in the day. One of the most unique features about the CL9000, and one that I always remember, is that the cab was mounted on 4 airbags, 1 in each corner. And the truck rode beautifully, but it had some quirks about it because of these air ride bags on the 4 corners. When you'd go to get into the truck, you'd reach up and grab the grab rail or the handle that was mounted behind the driver's door, and you'd go to pull yourself up into the truck, but because of the airbag system, the cab would lean over towards you, and that would give you an unsettling feeling. You felt like you were pulling the truck over on top of yourself. On top of that, it changed the angle from being straight up to about a 5 to 10 degree angle tilting towards the driver, and that made it even more difficult to get up into the cab. Once you were in the driver's seat and settled in the cab, the truck would level itself out. And as I said, it rode beautifully down the highway. But when you go into a corner, because of the airbags, the cab would tend to lean in the corner, which was kind of an unsettling feeling if you were looking in your mirror to see how your trailer was tracking, because the stacks were mounted solid to the frame rails. So they were always standing right up and down, but the cab would be leaning. So you'd look in your mirror to see where the corner was tracking with your trailer, and you could see one exhaust stack because it was up straight, the cab was leaning, and it gave you the sense that the truck was starting to roll over. And it gave you an uneasy feeling, and a lot of cabover guys that drove the 9000 Fords learned after a while not to look in their rearview mirrors when they were going around corners. It just scared them. Ford only had one truck plant, and in 1990 they decided to phase out the CL9000 because the demand for cabovers was waning. And they needed the space because drivers were ordering the LTL 9000 Ford, a conventional Ford. More of them preferred the conventionals, so they used all that space in the factory and retooled so the whole factory would build the LTL 9000. Back in those days, there weren't a whole lot of entertainment resources available to truck drivers. But one of the things that came out during that time were small black and white TVs with rabbit ears. So you could plant it on the shelf in your bunk, twist around the rabbit ears, and probably get a channel or two and watch TV through the night. And that was a new thing. We all thought it was a cool thing. All sorts of us rushed out and bought these little TVs. So I had a friend of mine. He slept outside the shop one night in his Cabover waiting for them to open so he could get in first thing in the morning. They woke him up, they pulled up the door, he rolled in his Cabover, beautiful new thing. And half asleep, he climbed out, began to jack up the cab because they were hinged at the front and you jacked them up from a handle at the bag and then they would tilt a full 80 degrees. And he had forgotten to lash down the brand new little TV that he had bought the week before. So when the cab got to about 80 degrees or so, all of a sudden this little black and white TV came crashing out of the bunk, out through the windshield, and down onto the shop floor. And my buddy said he thought he was going to cry. And the mechanics all had to turn away because they didn't want to see him laughing, you know. But one of the disadvantages of a Cabover, you had to remember if you were going to jack up the cab, you had to secure everything inside before you did that. Stay safe. Keep the rubber side down. Enjoy those old Cabovers when you see them. I still love to see them on the highway today. Take care, and I'll see you on the back haul.